A general weakness of Nurgle is, and always has been, their sort of low average melee attack. If you highlight the mark of Nurgle on these Marauder units, I think it even says it, decreases melee attack. So it would stand to reason that the melee defense debuffs should, by default, be pretty good for them. Epidemius does provide some with his Sands of Sickness chain debuff/augment. Kayzk, one of the new figures, a legendary hero in the DLC, of course, also has a melee defense debuff, the Sword of Filth. For some reason, I almost read that as Sword of Fish, but that would be something entirely different. And that's the only ability he's brought particularly on him this time. We'll take it as look at his abilities after the fact, but also has anti-infantry AP, decent all-around combat stats, does have the sort of low armor of the Rot Knight, but still, overall, very good combatant. Does have regeneration as well, which does make him weak to fire, but we'll get to that in just a minute. He's also got a couple of Bile Trolls, who, same thing, weak to fire with their regeneration. We can see some Bile being thrown up in the air by the Noxbringer, the Regiment-renowned Soul Grinder, which eats ammunition. We're going to look more at this again in some replays in the future, but definitely an interesting mechanic for sure. We've also got some Marauders here, as seen, Sorcerer of Nurgle of Death. Very interesting choice here from Tactical Itch. I do think generally, yeah, probably, I mean, to debuff, of course, you do get more fecundities, but yes, just probably better to have Lord of Nurgle overall. Although, we'll see. He's certainly going to try and output some damage. I brought Malice Darkblade in my Dark Elf build, since this is an early opponent of Epidemius in campaign. A potentially tough opponent if you're not prepared well. So, got that. Sorceress of Fire, because of course, we're against Nurgle. Some Dread Spears, and Witch Elves out on the flanks. Single Blackguard here in the center, and the Chilosantar Hydra. Basically, these two tools essentially plan on stacking them on top of each other and just grinding it out as best as possible. Dark Riders with shields to protect a couple of Dark Riders with repeater crossbows for some mobile skirmish. And let's get things rolling. Yeah, we've also got some Marauder Horsemen Hounds out on the side for Nurgle to give them some mobility. So Chilosantar going to unleash a quick breath attack through the center. Does some solid damage to the Marauders and the Trolls. Doesn't actually kill any Troll models, but yes, Chilosantar looking actually quite good these days. I don't know if this thing had a skin update at some point, but it does look absolutely fantastic. Wow, look at the texture on that thing. I haven't looked at the Chilosantar up close in quite some time. Epidemius and his ilk are going to charge on in, though, and you can see all this stuff popping off. So between everything going on here, we can take a look at what exactly is being debuffed and by how much. So yeah, Chilosantar, 0 melee defense, only 30 armor there. Weapon strength also down to about 374. Yeah, the Blackguard also down to 0 melee defense. So potential for some great damage output during this time, but it depends a lot on what the units are targeted as. And the Chilosantar actually, because it's blocking like a full unit of Trolls, and just generally not allowing... I think if the Trolls were able to get in contact with the Blackguard, they could potentially tear them apart during this time. But in response, I'm going to throw down a Burning Head, pop the Witch Brews on the Witch Elves out on the flanks, so they can just blend through those Marauders very quickly, try and find this gap here. Sort of sacrifice a couple of Dark Riders, throw a Dread Spear out there just to contest mobility while I get my Dark Riders up and through and start throwing some armor-piercing bolts at the Soul Grinder there. But the problem is, once the debuffs wear off, things will start to turn against Nurgle very quickly. And not to mention, of course, me having sort of a damage-focused build as well, sort of a damage-focused melee rush to a degree. I'm able to come in here and actually mop up a lot of his support units very quickly, which then leads to the Trolls being isolated. I also kind of accidentally popped Zarkan's transformation way too early. So, yeah, Malice is going to turn into demon form, and that'll put him on a little bit of a timer, but he'll also be able to, again, output a great amount of damage burst during this time with his different abilities and such. So, all this leads to a big chain route, basically, in the center pocket. Nurgle's leadership just gives out, and this is one issue I've found in this replay and a number of others with Bile Trolls, with Nurgle specifically. They seem to be much better on something like Warriors of Chaos, where you have more leadership support and like Archaon's immune to psychology from the Crown of Domination, whereas Nurgle doesn't have very many leadership support abilities, and I don't know if they have any AoE immune to psychology type stuff, so it does make using Trolls on Nurgle a little bit trickier. You kind of have to lean into the healing portion of it a little bit more, but yeah, unfortunately here they are able to just get out DPS'd, or at least out leadershiped. I don't know about out DPS'd hard necessarily, but the single entity fight is going to start to turn against me somewhat, though, as Sarkhan takes more and more damage here. Soul Grinder moves in and away from the crossbows, going to kind of block them with the Chill of Sontar here. Some great positioning, I have to say. Come in here, do some damage to my Firecaster as well, as she got caught up in combat. We've got the summoned Plague Bears, Exalted Plague Bears from Epidemius, helping to fight against the Blackguard. So it's going to be quite the blob grind here. See some more debuffs. That, all the things. Yeah, the Sands of Sickness and the Blade from Kayzk. Once again, debuffing all the things, except for, if we check in on the Blackguard, they're still at full melee defense, 48. Which is very interesting. You know, that's one thing about these sort of chain debuffs. Especially like Epidemius is, right? You just pop it and it goes off. I can't remember. I think Kayzk's you can maybe target on a specific unit and then it chains from there. I'd have to double check. I can't remember off the top of my head. But just in general, those chain hexes, you can't necessarily control where they're going to go, which sometimes can lead to a situation like this where the Blackguard did not get debuffed. And they were absolutely probably the unit in this engagement that needed to get debuffed the most. Well, besides Sarkhan, who did take a bunch of damage and is swiftly going towards his demise, but we do manage to fell the Soul Grinder. Chill of Sontar, just absolute MVPs. I'm going to send this one just direct message to Falcon, because I think it'll make him quite happy seeing the Chill of Sontar performing in such a way. But, yeah, Epidemius and Kayzk and the Sorcerer all still holding out, but dwindling support is going to make things tough for them. I've managed to, for the most part, keep things kind of moving on the outsides. The repeater crossbows had tangled with the Marauder Horsemen and lost, but at the very least we're able to kind of, again, keep them away from the center engagement and from throwing axes at the Blackguard, who are absolutely the priority target, or, I guess, win condition for me to keep alive. Priority target for, Tactical Lich here. The Chill of Sontar is as well, but I would say, arguably, Blackguard are more important. They're immune to psychology and great leadership. The Chill of Sontar could be routed, because leadership's not great on Hydras necessarily, but Dark Rider is able to chase some routing trolls and other units, just utilizing my mobility advantage to try and make sure those units can't come back and assist. We do get one more Bile Troll back in here, and Chill of Sontar is also at its healing cap, so this melee grind will continue for some time. But with Epidemius falling to the Blackguard, that is going to put a major dent in the leadership of Nurgle. And immediately the Sorcerer, Kayzk, and the Bile Trolls are going to tear route, and that will be army losses. So a swift end rather than a long grind, but still very interesting. I have to say, I like Tactical Lich's thinking on the build sort of synergy, even if like in execution it didn't end up working out great. We'll talk a little bit more about this. The Bile Trolls, again, an interesting choice. I just think probably they're better options for you. Maybe even just going with like mid-tier Great Weapon Chaos Warriors or some other tools. I don't know. We'll talk a little bit more about this. I'd like the Soul Grinder in theory as well, but with this tall of a build, it's just kind of tough. And this is one thing about Kayzk also. He does get some pretty good value, probably pays for himself here, especially with the debuff value, but he is pretty expensive, and again, it's kind of, with Nurgle, because of they're generally weak to missiles and getting kited, you need to be able to pad out with numbers, and especially like these extra kind of auxiliary support mobility units in Marauder Horsemen and Hounds and stuff to be able to protect big pieces like this. I don't know, it just becomes a little bit tough in some ways, although I don't know, I think there's maybe something to this. Perhaps you could swap out the Soul Grinder and just take more mobility to shut down enemy missiles, or else... well, let's get into the builds in just a minute here. But, yeah, Malice himself is an absolute menace, very strong in multiplayer and in campaign, and will definitely challenge many Epidemius players who are unprepared. But, yeah, does die here, even though he pays for himself. Chill of Sontar also doesn't actually get that much damage value, but tanks out a ton of damage. Well, not all, but a lot of which could have gone into the Blackguard, who themselves get some really nice value. And then, of course, the Witch Elves also on the flanks, just helping to have that burst to get through those low-tier Nurgle support units as quickly as possible. I've kind of been sleeping on Witch Elves a little bit since they took away their Rampage, but they are very good DPS with that Witch Brew, it must be said. The repeater crossbows also, just nice mobile missiles. A lot of people This is, again, discussion for another day. A lot of people were saying in my Outrider video that, yes, Outrider should be inaccurate, and I agree they shouldn't be super accurate, but I would expect a similar performance out of them as Dark Rider repeater crossbows. Even though, yeah, repeater crossbows right now are quite a bit more accurate, but we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully Creative Assembly fixes that. But anyway, rest of the build here means just Dread Spears. What do you really expect? 1,000 damage value on some Dark Riders, though. Love Dark Riders. Great charge bonus for how cheap they are. Great for chasing routing units. Yeah, just feasting some value here. So definitely an interesting one. Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about some of Nurgle's new tools. Why some things definitely fit better than others. Yeah, Kayzk is an interesting one. He's got a few really good abilities, but he's just expensive enough base cost, and you can't take him unmounted. So, and you're looking 1,200 for a pretty solid combat character. It doesn't seem like a lot, right? It's sort of filth. 1,400, you're looking at essentially like a single entity elite cavalry cost, right? The foul charge is also one that if you have a lot of high charge units and you're looking to get really aggressive with Nurgle, this is one that can be situationally pretty decent. So you kind of have to like YOLO Kayzk first, which can be a little bit risky sometimes, but you can remove enemies' charge bonus, at least temporarily, and then, yeah, you have to time your charges well with other follow-up units, but Nurgle, it doesn't have a ton of high charge units, which is why it's not like the best synergy in the world, but certainly something like, I don't know, taking him alongside Rot Knights and Chaos Knights, though, again, you're getting pretty expensive. Chaos Knights with Lances aren't amazing, and Rot Knights are, again, quite expensive, 60 charge on them, so, like, you're going to be getting some benefit from that, but it's more beneficial to just try and find a way to side or rear charge, honestly, so I don't know, like, it's fun and it's decent. Maybe you could use it for, well, I guess Plague Ogres have Ogre Charge already, so it's not like you really need that as much, right, in the case of the Plague Ogres, so it's just kind of a little bit of an awkward one to try and fit in. Yeah, same thing, like Bile Trolls, again, you look across a lot of heroic support abilities for Nurgle, and they don't really have much in the way of leadership support. We'll look at this new Chaos Lord of Nurgle on another day. But again, really not a lot in terms of leadership or immune psychology, right? And this Rot or Die does give extra leadership. That's one that you could potentially take to try and synergize with some trolls. Give some damage reflection as well, which it's not going to be wildly useful, but it's there. Tamarkan, again, not really much, right? Even looking at some of the generic lords, you've got Locus of Fecundity on the Herald, which is not wildly useful. Bestest still exists. Haven't really taken him a lot with the new stuff, but in theory he might have some good synergy. We'll have to look at that on another day. Yeah, the Sorcerer Lord of Nurgle doesn't really have much, right? Yeah, not really a lot. So that's one issue with taking trolls, certainly, with Nurgle, is there's just not a lot of ways to help them want to stick around, which is certainly a problem. Whereas, again, if we take a look, like Warriors of Chaos, they do have the Bile Trolls, but then you've got, like, Archaons, Immune Psychology, which is really the one I'm thinking of the most, but I'm sure they have some other... Oh yeah, the regular Paragon of Ruin also gives Immune Psychology, so any generic unmarked Chaos Lord, I think, can have that, right? So it's just interesting. I don't know. Nurgles, don't get me wrong, a lot of their new stuff is cool, and we'll look at some other stuff on another day. Haven't really shown Pestigors too much because one of their abilities is currently bugged. Although they're going to be pretty solid. This right here, Tears of Nurgle, is currently going off all of the time. It should only be going off when enemy units are routing, as you can see from the tooltip, which is why I haven't seen a lot of Pestigors in replays. But yeah, don't worry. Pestigors do exist, and they're decent, and we'll talk about them on another day when they're fixed. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.